He had $3 in a dream. She risked it all for one chance, and what happened next shocked everyone. Imani Carter was used to counting coins. Quarters for the bus. Dimes for instant noodles. Pennies scraped from the bottom of a chipped mug her grandmother kept on top of the fridge in their tiny one-bedroom apartment on the west side of Detroit. On the day everything changed, she was 23, standing in line at a dollar store with a racing heart and exactly $3.17 in her pocket. In her basket, one small jar of petroleum jelly, a pack of rubber bands, a travel-size bottle of coconut oil. That was it. That was all she could afford. Behind her, a little kid whined for candy. In front of her, a woman with a cart full of groceries scrolled on her phone, acrylic nails shining. Imani stared at the basket, fighting the familiar burn in her eyes. $3. $3 and a shut-off notice from the electric company on the kitchen table. $3 and a voicemail from her landlord saying, "Last warning, Miss Carter." $3 and a mother lying in a hospital bed across town, hooked up to machines because diabetes doesn't care if you're tired, broke, or 23. From the outside she looked strong. Head high. Back straight. Hair braided neatly into long cornrows she'd done herself at 3 in the morning because she couldn't afford a salon. But behind closed doors the truth was far different. She was exhausted. Tired of filling out job applications that vanished into silence. Tired of hearing, "We'll call you," and knowing they wouldn't. Tired of praying into the darkness, whispering, "God, if you're listening, I just need one break. Just one." "Ma'am? You paying cash or card?" the cashier asked, snapping her out of her thoughts. "Cash," Imani whispered, placing 3 wrinkled $1 bills on the counter and silently begging the total not to go over. It didn't. When she stepped back out into the cold Michigan air, plastic bags swinging from her fingers, the doubt hit her like a wave. What am I doing? She could have bought bread. A few cheap microwave meals. Instead, she'd bought supplies for something that only existed in her imagination. A homemade hair butter she'd been mixing in tiny batches since high school. Shea butter, coconut oil, a few drops of essential, a homemade hair butter she'd been mixing in tiny batches since high school. Shea butter, coconut oil, a few drops of essential oil when she could afford it. Back then it was just something she made for cousins before church on Sundays. Now it felt like her last wild card. She crossed the cracked parking lot, pulling her thin jacket tighter. Wind sliced through her sleeves, but her mind was somewhere else, replaying a sentence she'd written in the Notes app on her beat-up Android. "Crown by Imani, hair that remembers where you came from and shines where you're going." She didn't know why she'd written it. She wasn't a businesswoman. She had no investors, no website, no LLC, no plan. But she had 3 things: a recipe, a pair of hands, and a reason. Her mother, Denise, had always said, "Baby, our people carry whole worlds in our hair. Treat it like a crown, not a burden." Those words echoed in Imani's chest as she climbed the stairs to their apartment, the 3rd-floor walk-up that always smelled faintly like fried chicken and cigarette smoke. Inside, the living room was dim. One lamp. One sagging couch. One stack of medical bills on the coffee table. She pushed them aside, cleared a small space and set the dollar store bag down like it was sacred. In the silence, another hook from life itself whispered in her ear. One wrong decision. One moment. That's all it took to change their family forever. For her, that moment had been junior year of high school when Denise's blood sugar crashed at work. They'd found her slumped over a cash register at the grocery store. Since then, every choice Imani made had been wrapped around hospital visits, prescriptions, rent, survival. College. She tried community college for a semester. Dropped out when the co-pay for her mother's insulin doubled. Vacations. There were none. Dreams. Folded up and tucked away like old receipts. Tonight something shifted. Imani lined up the ingredients on the table. Melted what little she had left of the old shea butter slab in a dented pot over the stove, watching it soften slowly, patiently. Steam fogged the tiny kitchen window as she stirred in the new coconut oil with a borrowed spoon. Her phone buzzed with a notification. "You are 7 days past due. Service will be disconnected." She swallowed hard, throat tight. She thought she had lost every chance, until this one small decision forced her to choose. Survive the same way, or finally try something new. Her hands moved on instinct. Whip, fold, stir. And again. until the mixture turned from oily to creamy, from lumpy to silky. She added a bit of the cheap vanilla fragrance she'd been hoarding for months, stirring until the whole kitchen smelled like sugar and warmth. She scraped the butter into an old, cleaned candle jar. On the glass, she stuck a scrap of paper and with a black marker she wrote, "Crown by Imani." It looked childish. Not like the sleek packaging she saw online. But when she held that little jar in her hands, something inside her sparked. "This is stupid," she whispered. "This is everything," something deeper answered. Her younger cousin Tasha came by the next afternoon, just to check on Auntie D. The truth? She needed her hair done before a party. "Girl, my ends are crying," Tasha said, dropping onto the couch and scrolling TikTok. "I need you to bless me." Imani almost laughed. "I'm not a miracle worker. You might as well be. Ain't nobody lay these braids like you." Imani hesitated, then went to the kitchen and brought out the jar. "What's that?" Tasha asked. "A thing I'm trying," Imani said, suddenly shy. "Hair butter. I made it." "You made it?" Tasha sat up. "Let me see." Imani dipped her fingers into the jar and massaged the butter into Tasha's scalp, working it through the curls with slow, deliberate movements. The room filled with that warm vanilla scent again. Under her hands, Tasha's hair softened, drank in the moisture like it had been waiting its whole life for this. Tasha closed her eyes. "Yo, this feels good." Imani kept quiet, heart racing. 2 hours later, when the braids were finished, Tasha stood in the bathroom, turning her head left and right. The light caught the shine in every single plate. "Okay, but wait," Tasha said, grabbing her phone. "I look expensive." She flipped the camera to selfie mode, did a slow 360 and hit record. "Y'all look at my hair," she said into TikTok, angling her braids. "My cousin Imani just did this. And she used some hair butter she made. Like no lie, my hair never felt this soft. Crown by Imani or whatever, remember the name." Imani froze. "Tasha, delete that." "Nope," Tasha grinned. "If you're gonna be broke, you might as well be broke and booked." She posted it before Imani could stop her. Imani rolled her eyes, but that night as she lay awake listening to the hum of the fridge and her mother's soft snoring from the bedroom, her phone buzzed again. And again. And again. He finally picked it up. 12 new DMs. "Does your cousin sell that?" 6 comments. "How much for the butter?" 3 messages from girls she hadn't talked to since high school. "Imani, I heard you started a hair thing? Can I buy some?" He stared at the screen, numb. They told her she could never build anything from where she came from. So without saying a word, she started anyway. Her thumb hovered over the keyboard. For the first time in a long time, she let herself imagine an answer that didn't sound like an apology. She typed slowly, hands shaking. "Hey love, I'm just getting started, but yeah. I can make you a jar." And with that tiny message, a door opened she didn't even know was still there. She thought she was just making one jar. But what came next? No one in Detroit was ready for. The next morning, her phone kept buzzing until she couldn't ignore it anymore. Imani sat up in bed, hair wrapped, heart pounding. Her mother was awake too, propped against pillows, pale but smiling softly. "You look like God just slid a blessing under the door," Denise whispered. Imani handed her the phone. Denise squinted, scrolled, then raised her brows high. 12 orders already? Girl, you better get to work." "But Mama, we don't even have electricity money," Imani said quietly. "We barely have groceries. I don't have bottles, labels, nothing." Her mother reached for her hand with paper, thin fingers. "Baby, sometimes God gives the seed after you plant the soil. You made the soil last night." She squeezed gently. "Now plant." That was the moment Imani made the choice. She would not fail quietly again. She called her cousin. "Tasha, I need help." Tasha hooped on the phone, half shouting, half laughing. "Say less. I'll bring what I got. We finna turn you apartment into a hair lab." 30 minutes later, Tasha showed up with a bag of dollar store plastic containers, a half-used tub of shea butter, 2 essential oils she'd stolen from her ex, and ramen noodles. Because hustle needs fuel. They spent the entire afternoon melting, whipping, pouring, sweat on foreheads, music blasting, Detroit skyline glowing orange outside the window. By evening they had 16 jars lined on the counter like soldiers. Crown, handwritten on each label. Not fancy. Not perfect. But real. When Imani posted the photo online, she wrote only 3 words. Ready for pickup. She expected one sale. By midnight she had 32. She had no website. No shipping supplies. No plan, except to keep going. But a dream doesn't grow without chaos. Orders were late. Her phone overheated from notifications. Her mother needed hospital transport twice in 10 days. Imani worked until her fingers cramped, her back ached, her eyes blurred. She braided 2 heads a day. Made butter at night. Slept 4 hours on good days. 2 on bad ones. She risked everything for one chance. The bills were still there. The fear was still there. But something else was growing too. Belief. A week later the lights went out. The hum of the refrigerator died. The music stopped. Their tiny apartment drowned in silence. Imani froze mid-stir, tears burning behind her eyes. Not now, please not now. Her mother's voice came from the bedroom, soft but unbroken. Baby, candles are in the top drawer. Light doesn't leave just because the room goes dark. So Imani cooked her product by candlelight. Hands steady, jaw clenched, fire in her chest. When she delivered to her customers that night, they gasped. You made this in the dark? You're serious about this? How much for the next jar? Imani whispered, $10. A girl placed a $20 in her palm and said, keep the change. You're going somewhere. And that was the night it clicked. She didn't need permission. She didn't need perfect. He just needed to keep going. Tasha started filming behind-the-scenes clips. Imani started taking bus rides across the city delivering jars by hand. Customers began posting before-after photos. Within a month she had over 300 orders. But with growth came a challenge bigger than poverty. Not everyone wanted a black girl from the West Side to win. Success had weight. Not money, she still had barely enough to keep food in the house. Not comfort, she was more exhausted than she'd ever been. No, the weight was expectation. Every new order was hope. Every jar was proof she wasn't invisible anymore. Every message that read, sis, this saved my hair, was fuel she'd never tasted before. But success attracts eyes. And not all eyes are kind. One name kept popping up in her notifications. Amber Lewis. Pretty. Loud. Popular. A girl from high school who once laughed at Imani's thrift store shoes. Amber DM'd her one night. Girl, your product is cute. Let me promote it for real. I got 14K followers. Think big. Imani hesitated. It sounded like opportunity. But success taught her to read tone between lines. So, she agreed to a trial. Amber picked up 6 jars. Smiled bright. Took a selfie. Promised a shout-out. And disappeared for 5 days. No post. No tags. No word. Imani didn't sleep much those nights. Every jar mattered. She could have sold those 6 twice over. She needed that exposure. She needed that boost. Finally, on day 6, Amber posted. Imani's heart raced when she opened the link. But her breath stopped. Amber stood in perfect lighting, nails immaculate, hair slicked sleek, holding one of Imani's jars. But the caption cut like a blade. Trying out this small brand, but honestly, I'm launching my own line soon. Stay tuned. #real quality coming soon. No tag. No credit. No crown by Imani. Just a flex. A rewrite. A knife. Her stomach dropped. Her hands shook. For the first time in weeks she felt that old voice return. Maybe you're not built for this. She closed her laptop, pressed her forehead to the cool surface of the table. Tasha stormed in minutes later, phone in hand. Imani, she copied you. Look. Amber's new story flashed across the screen. A jar almost identical to crown. Same color. Same texture. Label reading Royal Roots. Imani felt her heartbeat in her teeth. She's stealing from you, cousin, Tasha whispered. Imani could barely speak through the ache. But I let her in. The next morning something changed. She sat at the kitchen table the way she once sat in prison, waiting rooms, in job interview lines, at her mother's hospital bedside. So, silent. Thinking. Then she stood. Not defeated. Decided. If she wanted royalty, Imani thought, I'll show her what a real crown looks like. Tasha blinked. What you about to do? Imani tied her hair back. Rolled her sleeves. Lit the stove. Work. Because she realized something powerful. She didn't need to fight Amber. She just needed to outgrow her. That week she upgraded her formula. Added argan oil. Infused it with rosemary. Found a wholesaler who let her pay in installments. The scent was richer. The texture smoother. The effect undeniable. Then she filmed her first video. No makeup. No studio lights. Just honesty. Camera shaking slightly in her hand, she looked into the lens and spoke. I started this brand with $3. No investors. No degree. No fancy equipment. Just faith, my mother's wisdom, and a dream I refused to bury. If you're building from nothing, this is for you. She showed her product. Showed her hands. Showed the grind. And she ended with, they said a girl like me couldn't build anything. So I built something they'll never forget. She posted it. Closed the app. Went to bed tired, unsure, afraid but moving anyway. She thought nothing would happen overnight. But by sunrise, she had 22,000 likes. Her follower count soared. Orders jumped to 1,200. Orders still shipped. Reviews still came. Growth still climbed, slowly but still forward. One evening Denise whispered, "Baby, I don't need you to save me. I just need you to sit with me." So Imani climbed into bed beside her, wrapped an arm around her thin shoulders, and held on like time was something she could anchor. And in that quiet, Denise said one last gift. What you're building isn't a business. It's a legacy. And legacies don't die. Imani cried until the sun rose. Because somewhere deep inside she felt the truth. Goodbye was coming. 2 months later, Denise passed peacefully, hand in Imani's, with gospel music humming low in the room. No pain. No fear. Just love wrapping every corner of the apartment like a final blessing. For 3 days, Imani couldn't touch her products. Couldn't open her laptop. Couldn't look at a single jar. The world went silent again. But this time, silence didn't break her. It shaped her. On the 4th day she walked into the warehouse. Not as a businesswoman. As a daughter continuing her mother's dream. She placed one jar of Crown on the center table, lit a candle and whispered, "This is for you." And the next chapter of her empire began. In the weeks after her mother's passing, Detroit felt colder. Not weather. Not wind. Life. Without Denise's laughter in the apartment, without her voice reminding Imani to eat, to breathe, to hope, silence felt like an ocean she could drown in. But Imani did something most people wouldn't understand. She returned to work. Not to escape grief, but to honor what built her. Every jar she filled, every label she smoothed down, every shipping box she taped shut. She heard her mother's voice guiding her hands. Legacies don't die. So she worked slowly, carefully, ritualistically. Like grief was a thread woven into every product. Crown began expanding into more than butter. Customers kept asking for more. Shampoo for natural curls, deep conditioner for breakage, scalp serum for alopecia, edge revival cream. Each night Imani tested formulas, hair wrapped, music low, grief heavy, but purpose heavier. Her tears sometimes fell into the mixing bowl. But she kept stirring. She built a product line one jar at a time, naming each item after the women who shaped her. Denise Deep Repair. Aunt May Moisture Mask. Grandmama's Growth Oil. Daughter's Future Leave-In. Customers didn't just buy hair care. They bought story. Purpose. Identity. Crown wasn't a brand anymore. It was a movement. Orders passed 10,000 per month. Her small warehouse became too small. Her 3 assistants could barely keep up. One afternoon, while reviewing order sheets stacked like skyscrapers, Tasha laughed breathlessly. "Girl, we need a bigger kingdom." Imani cracked a rare smile. The factory, she thought. Not dreamed. Not wished. Needed. She started scouting buildings. Old auto plants, empty grocery stores, abandoned storage units. When she walked into a 15,000 square foot brick warehouse near Eastern Market, something inside her whispered, "This is home." Dusty floors. Broken windows. Smelled like rust and old engines. But space. Space to grow. Space to build. Space to become something the world could no longer ignore. She signed the lease with shaking hands. Not fear. Destiny. Meanwhile, her influence grew too. She was invited to speak at high schools, women's shelters, business summits. Black girls lined hallways waiting to hug her. Grandmothers brought jars to get signed like vinyl records. One 12-year-old approached nervously. "Miss Imani, my mom said we look like you." And if you made it, I can too. Imani knelt to meet her eyes. You won't just make it, she whispered. You'll lead. Teachers cried. Parents clapped. Imani felt her mother in every heartbeat. But growth invites pressure. Pressure invites competition. Competition invites attack. And the industry was about to test her resilience like never before. Because the more she expanded, the more dangerous she became to companies who had owned the market for decades. She didn't know it yet, but someone was preparing to take her down from the inside. The new factory opened with celebration. Balloons. Music. Women dancing with twist-outs shining under warehouse lights. The press came. Local news crews filmed. Teen girls cried when they touched Imani's hand like she was living proof that dreams weren't fantasies. They were blueprints. But behind the applause, shadows were already moving. Imani needed more hands. More minds. A team big enough to meet the demand exploding month after month. Resumes flooded in. Young chemists, marketing kids, logistics workers, influencers wanting permanent partnerships. Among them was one woman who stood out above the rest. Camille Rivers. 30 years old. Former marketing manager at a major beauty corporation. Fluent speech, confident presence, perfect smile. She said all the right things. She praised Imani's brand, her story, her purpose. She called the empire cultural gold. Imani hired her on the spot. And for a while Camille was brilliant. Sales campaigns doubled revenue. Celebrity clients appeared. Crown went from a Detroit success story to a national headline. Interviews. Magazine covers. Brand features. TikTok trends. Everyone was talking about Crown by Imani. Everyone, including people who wanted the throne. One evening, while finalizing a pitch for a nationwide Target rollout, Imani walked by the office Camille used. The lights were on. The door slightly open. Inside, Camille stood with her back turned, speaking low into her phone. Yes, she trusts me completely. The files are on her laptop, including the formulas. Give me 2 weeks. Imani froze. Every muscle locked. Heat rushed into her ears. Formulas. Her formulas. The recipes she built in grief and hunger. The legacy she formed with her mother's voice in her chest. Someone was trying to steal it. And Camille, the woman she welcomed in, paid well, praised publicly, was delivering the empire to someone else piece by piece. Imani forced herself to step back silently. She didn't confront her. Not yet. He just listened. Once I send everything over, the buyout offer should come through. She'll sell if we push her hard enough. Trust me, everyone breaks eventually. Imani felt something inside her crack. But not the way Camille expected. Not broken like glass. Broken like lightning. Silent. White hot. World splitting. She didn't cry. She didn't shake. She closed the door quietly and walked away with a face like stone. Because she understood something in that moment. They didn't just want to compete with her. They wanted her erased. But they forgot who she was. A woman who survived poverty. A woman who built from candlelight. A woman who buried her mother and still stood up to work. They thought she would break. They had no idea she was made of fire. The next day she didn't fire Camille. No. She kept her close. Smiled back. Listened to her suggestions. Let her believe nothing was wrong. While secretly, Imani prepared for war. She hired a cybersecurity expert. Locked her formulas offline. Wrote new contracts. Installed surveillance. Documented every suspicious move. She didn't plan to stop Camille. She planned to expose her publicly. Because sometimes survival isn't quiet. Sometimes survival is loud enough for the whole world to hear. The world had found her. And success was no longer a question. It was a storm. In 3 months, Imani went from mixing 1 jar on a stove to filling her entire apartment with orders. The walls smelled like shea and coconut. The counters were sticky with oil. Receipts, boxes, and labels covered every inch of space like confetti after a parade. Crown by Imani was no longer a hobby. It was a movement. Girls stopped her in grocery stores. Mothers hugged her outside buses. Stylists texted at 2 a.m. saying, "We need more. We're sold out. Bring whatever you have." She was working 15 hours a day mixing, melting, packaging, labeling by hand. Her body ached, but her eyes were lit with something no one could dim anymore. But growth is loud. And loud things draw attention. Some people cheered for her. Some waited for her to fail. And some wanted what she had. That's when the email arrived. From Sephora Regional Vendor Program. Subject: We would like to discuss Crown by Imani. Her heart slammed against her ribs. She read the lines 3 times, whispering the words out loud just to believe them. We are interested in placing your products in select stores. We would like to discuss your capacity for 10,000 units. 10,000 units. She sat down slowly, like the world had tilted beneath her. Tasha screamed when she heard. Her mother cried. Imani just stared at her jars lined up on the counter. 37 of them. That was all she had. 37 jars. 37 steps up a mountain she now realized was Everest. She wanted this. She fought for this. But now. The dream was bigger than her kitchen, her budget, her body. How am I supposed to make 10,000? She whispered. Her mother reached for her hand. You don't climb Everest in one step, baby, she said softly. You take one. Then another. Then another. Imani nodded. But deep down, fear pulsed like a second heartbeat. What if I can't handle this? What if this is where I fall? What if success breaks me in a way poverty never could? And then the storm began. First her supplier raised prices. Then shipping got delayed. Then 3 orders were returned because jars cracked in transit. Small things, tiny cracks. But cracks spread. The pressure of growth pressed down like weight on her chest. Her phone buzzed non-stop. Customers refreshing their tracking numbers. Emails stacking like bricks. And then, one day her website crashed. Not for 5 minutes. Not for an hour. For 3 days. Thousands of customers. Zero access. Orders stuck. Refund requests flooding in. She stood alone in her living room, surrounded by boxes and labels and jars like the rubble of her own success. Breathing hard, vision blurring. For the first time since she started, Imani almost broke. She slid down the wall, hands shaking, tears falling heavy and hot. I built this from nothing, she whispered. So why does it feel like I'm losing everything now? 3 days of silence online felt like a funeral. No orders. No payments. No hope. Imani lay awake on her couch, half covered by a blanket, eyes swollen, mind looping the same sentence. Maybe I reached as far as I can. The website was still down. Rent was late. Her mother's medication refill was due tomorrow. The dream felt like a building she'd constructed by hand, brick by brick, now shaking at the foundation. And then her phone buzzed. One notification. Just one. She almost ignored it. But she opened it. From someone she didn't know. Hi Imani. My daughter has alopecia. She hasn't worn her natural hair outside in months. We tried your crown butter. And today she smiled in the mirror for the first time. Please don't stop. We need you. Imani stared at the screen as her throat closed. Not over an order. Not over money. Over purpose. She whispered into the quiet room. I'm not doing this for sales. I'm doing this for us. She wiped her face. Sat up. Opened her notebook. And began to rebuild. The next morning she contacted a local business incubator downtown. She applied for grants. She learned about co-manufacturing. She posted publicly about the website crash. Not with shame but with transparency. Her post read, I started this business in my kitchen with $3. I never expected it to grow this fast. But I won't break under the blessing. I'm scaling up. Crown by Imani is becoming bigger than me. Bigger than a living room. If you believe in me, stay. We're going further. Then she turned off her phone. And went to work. Real work. Meetings. Forms. Loan applications. Vendor calls. Research at 3 a.m. Deliveries at sunrise. 2 weeks later the incubator replied. Approved. Complete funding for equipment, workspace, materials. A small warehouse. 3 assistants. A business mentor. Her knees gave out when she read it. She laughed. She cried. She called her mother first. Baby, Denise whispered, voice trembling, God ain't finished with us yet. Crown by Imani moved into its first production space. Not glamorous. Concrete floors. Metal shelves. A single fan that sounded like an airplane engine. But to Imani, it was a palace. She ran her fingers across the stainless steel mixing vat. Industrial, powerful, gleaming under bright white lights. Not a kitchen stove. A factory. Tasha danced across the room yelling, "We professional now." Imani smiled through tears. She was no longer making product in a pot. She was building an empire. And Detroit was watching. But as the dream expanded, something darker followed. Orders were bigger. Expectations heavier. And the industry was paying attention. Some wanted to mentor her. Others wanted to partner. And one company, $1 million competitor, wanted to crush her before she grew too large. Imani didn't know it yet. But the greatest battle of her life was only just beginning. The business was booming. Warehouse lights. Stacks of inventory. Order sheets like waterfalls. But at home the air was thin. Her mother, once steady and laughing through pain, now moved slowly, breathing hard after a short walk, fingers trembling when she held her tea. Doctors said what Imani feared. Complications. Organs strain. Time running shorter than anyone wanted to admit. Imani sat beside her hospital bed, the beeping monitors marking each second with brutal honesty. "Mama," she whispered, "I'm trying to make everything okay. I'm trying so hard." Denise smiled softly, eyes tired but glowing with pride. "You already did. Baby, you gave me more joy than pain ever took." Imani pressed her forehead against her mother's hand, tears falling silently. She built this empire for them. For security. For the future. For the woman who raised her. And now that future was slipping through her fingers. As her mother's health declined, Imani faced something she'd never had before. A choice between growth and presence. The Sephora deal required travel. Meetings in New York, presentations, contracts. Investors wanted face-to-face pitches. Demand was climbing. But Denise needed her at the bedside. Not just as a provider. As a daughter. One night, Tasha found her in the warehouse packing orders alone. "You haven't been home in 2 days," she said gently. Imani stared at the shipping table, eyes glazed. "If I stop, we lose momentum. If I leave, Mama's alone." Tasha walked over, put her arms around her. "You don't have to choose alone." That weekend, she brought her mother home with hospital equipment, hired a nurse, turned their living room into a sanctuary of warmth and prayer. Imani worked days at the warehouse. Nights at her mother's bedside. Barely sleeping, barely breathing, but moving like a woman made of purpose. Imani watched carefully for the next 2 weeks. Every late-night email Camille sent. Every file she tried to download. Every conversation she stepped away to take. The trap was tightening, silently. But Imani didn't rush. She moved like a lioness. Measured. Patient. Watching prey walk deeper into the grass. Meanwhile, Crown was growing faster than ever. Natural hair influencers were making week-long tutorials. Black celebrities were sending photos showing growth edges they thought were gone forever. It wasn't just a product. It was healing. A reminder that hair, heritage, and hope could all grow back. Journalists started calling Imani not business owner, but innovator, visionary, industry disruptor. Companies worth millions now studied her like competition. And one of them wanted to steal her creation through Camille. Imani waited until she had enough proof to bury the betrayal so deep it couldn't crawl back. A Thursday evening gave her the moment. Camille unlocked her office after hours and plugged in a flash drive. Imani watched through the security feed, steady as ice. File transfer. 97%. Then 100%. That was enough. Imani dialed her lawyer. Her board. Her PR director. Her entire leadership team. In minutes, people filled the factory. Not yelling. Not panicking. Silent. Ready. Camille closed her laptop, walked out, confident, smiling like she'd won. Instead, she met Imani standing in the middle of the factory floor. Workers paused. Machines hummed. Time held its breath. "Camille," Imani said calmly, "let's talk." Camille's face flickered. Confusion, then fear, then calculation. "You're working late," Camille tried to laugh. "Dedicated. I like it." Imani stepped forward slowly. "Dedicated? Yes. Blind? No." She nodded to security. Screens lit up showing Camille's recorded calls, emails, flash drive transfers. Evidence undeniable. Her betrayal glowed in 1080p on the factory wall. Workers froze. Whispers rippled. Camille's face drained. "Is this some kind of joke?" she snapped. Imani's voice was soft but heavy as a verdict. The only joke was thinking you could steal what I built with my blood. Camille swallowed hard. You don't understand the industry. You're small. You don't have the weight to. Imani cut her off. No. You don't understand. She stepped closer, eyes sharp with grief-born power. I built this from $3. From nights without food. From hospital waiting rooms. From a mother I buried but still hear every morning. She paused. You think you can make me kneel? I learned to build standing up. Security escorted Camille out. Her access revoked. Her scheme exposed. Her reputation shattered. But Imani didn't celebrate. Betrayal doesn't make victory sweet. It makes it necessary. The industry shifted that night. Crown was no longer a newcomer. No longer underestimated. She was now seen as something else. A threat with teeth. A storm with purpose. A founder with fire. And storms don't ask permission to take the sky. With Camille gone, something unexpected happened. The team grew stronger. People worked later, not out of fear but out of loyalty. Workers who once doubted Imani now stood taller. It was as if removing one snake let the entire garden breathe. And then, CNN called. Then Forbes. Then Essence requested a cover feature titled, From Homeless to $1 Million Hair Empire. The Rise of Imani Carter. She sat in the studio wearing a sleek emerald suit, skin glowing, hair a full coiled halo rising like a crown built from everything she survived. The interviewer leaned in. Imani, how did you go from $3 to here? She smiled, but her eyes shimmered like deep water. I didn't grow a business first. I grew belief. I watered faith before plants. I fed my dream before myself some nights. That's how you survive poverty. You eat hope. People watching cried. Not out of sadness but recognition. Women wrote. You told my story. You made me try again. I haven't given up today because of you. Her success wasn't profit anymore. It was permission for millions to rise too. Then came the message that shifted her life again. Michelle Obama. Not her team. Not her PR director. Herself. She wanted to meet. Imani stared at the email for 10 minutes, breath shallow, body shaking like the earth under a coming wave. The meeting was private. Quiet. 2 women. Tea and soft afternoon light. Michelle listened to her story like it was scripture. Then she said something Imani would never forget. You are what Black resilience looks like. And now you must become what Black opportunity feels like. Imani froze. Michelle continued. Millions of girls don't need your product. They need your blueprint. And with that, everything shifted. Crown had healed hair. Now it was time to heal futures. Michelle offered partnership to open training programs across underserved communities in the U.S. Free business education. Grants for Black women with ideas but no room to bloom. Spaces where poverty wasn't the end of a sentence, but the beginning of a rewrite. Imani felt her throat tighten. Her mama would have cried salt and honey tears to see this. Weeks later, she stood on a stage in Atlanta, the first city in the program. Crowds packed the building. Mothers, daughters, students, grandmothers. Some with natural crowns, some with scarves, some with pain behind their eyes she recognized like her own reflection. Imani stepped to the mic. And history held its breath. She stood on that Atlanta stage like a warrior crowned in victory. The lights painted her in gold. The sea of faces watched, hungry for hope, for proof that broken beginnings do not define the end. Imani breathed in. Hope. I didn't come here to tell you I made it. I came here to tell you, so can you. Thunderous applause shook the room. She felt invincible. But outside, beyond the flashing cameras and warm praise, a different kind of storm gathered. An envelope slipped into her hotel mailbox. No return address. No sender. Just one word written across the front. Remember. Inside was a photograph. Not of her success, but of her kneeling in that abandoned apartment at 17. Thin, exhausted, holding the last $3 in her hand. Someone had taken it. Someone who watched her suffer. Someone who was there. And on the back, written in shaky ink. Success doesn't erase debt. You owe me. Her blood ran cold. She felt that old hunger, that old fear return like a ghost she thought she buried. The past wasn't gone. It was waiting in the dark. That night she couldn't sleep. She sat by the hotel window, watching headlights smear across wet pavement. Her life was perfect now, but perfection has shadows. Who sent that photo? A man from the shelter? Someone who once helped her? Someone who saw her climb and wanted a piece? The letter was a warning, not a request. The next morning another message arrived. This time digital. Anonymous. You rose alone? Oh. You rose because I let you. A chill crept under her skin. She read it 3 times. Someone believed they built her. Someone felt ownership over her rise. Someone wanted to pull the queen back to her knees. Imani straightened her shoulders. Not again. Not ever again. She called Marcus first. He listened, jaw tight, voice steady. You don't negotiate with ghosts. We find them. We face them. He flew to her within hours. 2 people who started with nothing. Now strategizing like generals. They requested hotel records. Security footage. Envelope fingerprints. Nothing. Whoever sent it knew how not to be seen. At her next public appearance she felt eyes on her from somewhere in the crowd. A presence she couldn't locate. Familiar. Heavy. During her speech she caught one figure standing perfectly still while everyone else clapped. Face half hidden. Frozen. Watching. When the crowd shifted, the figure was gone. Imani tried to continue as if nothing was wrong. She gave interviews, attended investor dinners, launched new scholarships. But while she smiled on stages across America, every airport, every backstage corridor, every hotel hallway felt like it held eyes. Not the eyes of fans. The eyes of someone who knew her before she was Imani Carter. Before Crown. Before Forbes. Back when she was just a hungry girl with empty hands and burning hope. And that made this shadow more dangerous than any competitor. Because strangers attack your money. But the past attacks your soul. One evening after a Women in Business conference in Seattle, she returned to her hotel suite. Marcus was still at a meeting across town. Security stood at the elevators. Everything felt normal. Until she opened the door. On her bed, laid neatly, almost respectfully, was her original denim jacket from age 17. The one with frayed elbows. The one she slept in on cold nights. The one she lost. Her heart dropped. Inside the pocket was a folded scrap of paper. 2 sentences. Don't forget who fed you. Don't forget who watched. She sank onto the mattress, jacket trembling in her fingers like memory made physical. Someone from that shelter. Someone from those streets. Followed her into success. Not asking. Claiming. A debt. Marcus arrived minutes later, breath sharp, eyes scanning the room like a soldier. This isn't random, he said. They're close. Too close. Security swept the suite. No signs of forced entry. Locks untouched. Whoever entered either had access. Or was clever enough to bypass systems built to protect millionaires. The police filed a report. But reports don't stop ghosts. That night Marcus slept on the floor outside her bedroom door. Imani lay awake, jacket beside her like a living past. Fame gave her everything she dreamed of. But it also erased the distance between then and now. Because when you rise high enough, people below start reaching. Some reach to join you. Others to pull you down. But in the morning, something changed inside her. She didn't feel hunted. She felt chosen for battle. Imani Carter did not survive poverty, hunger, betrayal, business wars, and her own doubt. Just to be shaken by a shadow. She stood before the mirror, rolled her shoulders back, and said aloud, "If the past wants me, it can meet me face to face." He would find them. Not with fear, but with truth. Because if someone believed she owed them, then somewhere in her story was a piece she never understood. And the first clue came from where she least expected it. A woman named Marjorie Ellis, former shelter worker, reached out through email. "I remember you, Imani. But I also remember the man who watched you from the stairwell every night. I think he's back." Imani read the message 3 times. Her pulse thundered like a war drum. A watcher. Not random. Not new. Old. Someone who had been near her even when she thought she was invisible. Someone who fed her scraps, left spare blankets, slipped money under doors. But never spoke. Not kindness. Not cruelty. Just presence. And now presence returned. Not silent anymore. Imani held the rusty key for days before she understood what it belonged to. Not a room. Not a locker. A storage box. The kind used in old bus stations back in the early 2000s. She and Marcus searched records until they found it. A long-abandoned locker at Atlanta Greyhound Terminal, sealed for unpaid fees nearly 13 years earlier. The dates aligned with Reggie's disappearance. Imani insisted on going alone. Because this wasn't Marcus's battle. This was hers. The bus station was quieter now. Renovated, cleaner, but connected to the same past that shaped her. Her footsteps echoed under the high ceiling as she approached the row of metal lockers like soldiers in formation. Locker B17. Her heart thudded, steady and slow, like a drum calling her back to the beginning. He pushed the key in. Turned. The lock clicked. Inside was a small cardboard box wrapped in black tape. Her fingers trembled as she peeled it back. What she found inside shattered every assumption. Not threats. Not leverage. Not weapons. A journal. A photo. And a letter addressed to her. The photo. A grainy Polaroid of her at 17, asleep on a shelter cot. Taken from the stairwell. She remembered those nights. The fear, the hunger, the feeling of being watched. But now she noticed something else in the picture. A man's hand leaving a sandwich beside her. Not menacing. Careful. Almost gentle. The journal. It was Reggie's. Pages filled with broken handwriting. He wrote about the shelter. About the people there. About her. But not like a stalker. Like someone who saw in her what she never saw in herself. The girl with the fire in her eyes. She will get out. She will rise. She will be the one who escapes when the rest of us drown. I ain't got much, but I can make sure she eats. I want to tell her she's meant for more. But people like me ruin bright things. I'll leave before I cast a shadow on her path. Imani's throat tightened. This man, broken, unpredictable, silent, was not claiming her success. He was protecting her from afar. Because he believed she would become something great. He never approached. Never asked for thanks. Never tried to take credit. He simply watched, fed and left. Because he thought he didn't deserve to stand in her light. The letter. Written in a shaky hand. Imani. You don't know me, not really. But I knew you before the world did. I saw a girl who still had hope in her eyes even when her stomach was empty. I didn't help so you'd owe me. I helped because one day you'll help millions. And I wanted to know I wasn't wrong about at least one thing in my life. If this reaches you, it means you survived. And that's all I ever wanted. Don't fear me. I'm gone now. Remember this instead. Sometimes angels look like ghosts. Signed, Reggie King. Underneath, a note added later. I left you that jacket so you'd remember where you came from. Not to pull you back. But so no one could ever drag you down again. Imani pressed the letter to her chest and cried. Deep, shaking tears she hadn't shed in years. Tears for the frightened girl she once was. Tears for the broken man who tried to protect her without ever touching her life. Tears for all the misunderstood souls who give what they can quietly without applause. Imani built a new branch of Crown. The Reggie King Initiative. Shelter programs. Education grants. Food sponsorships for teens with no family. Counseling for men who grew up unseen, unheard, unhealed. She never glorified him. Never called him a hero. Never hid his flaws. She simply said, a man I barely knew saved me when I had nothing. Now I save others so his kindness doesn't die with him. Years later, during a speech at Harvard, someone asked, Imani, what shaped you the most, poverty or success? She smiled, eyes soft. Neither. What shaped me was a stranger who believed my future was worth protecting when I didn't believe I had one. I built everything from nothing. But no one builds alone. And that is what makes success real. The room rose to its feet. A standing ovation for a woman who climbed from hunger to global impact. And carried every broken soul along with her.